Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the M16A4. I was pretty curious to see how this weapon would perform. I know a lot of people were kind of upset that the A3 version of this gun wasn't included in the current game, and I kind of wanted to see if it was still kind of a competitive pick, or at least the M16A4 version was a viable option. And so after playing for many hours and testing this weapon and getting around 400 kills, I think it's safe to say that this weapon does require a little bit more patience. It requires a little bit more skill on the player that uses it, but once you get the hang of it and you use it correctly, this can be a very powerful weapon. And so to start things off, the M16A4 has the standard damage model. It's going to do 25 damage up close, it's going to drop off to 18 damage at long range. You guys know this, all very standard. But the nice aspect of it is that it has 800 rounds per minute, and when you compare that to a lot of the other assault rifles, that's above average. Like, it's not the 1000 of the FAMAS, it's not the 900 of the AEK, but it's still a very competent rounds per minute. And so if you get into some tight situations where someone rounds the corner, even though the M16A4 is burst fire, if you kind of spam the trigger finger really quickly, it almost works like it is automatic fire, and you can take people down really fast. And so that is one nice thing of this gun. Another nice aspect is that it has the fastest reload time out of the assault rifles. Like, it is blazing fast. Its short reload time is going to take you 1.8 seconds to go through the entire animation, or if you still have a bullet in the chamber, and its long reload time is only going to take you 2.37 seconds. Like, that is just insanely fast. If you compare that to something like the FAMAS's short reload time is longer than the long reload time of the M16A4. Like, the FAMAS's short is going to take you 2.8 seconds, and its long is 3.5 seconds. And so that just gives you an insane advantage over some of these other weapons. Like, if you were in a tight spot where there are multiple enemies around, but you've gone through almost all of your rounds, you can quickly just reload and have the peace of mind that it's not going to take you an eternity to go through the entire animation. And so instead of having to switch on over to your pistol to finish off the enemy, or if you know that there's multiple enemies nearby where the pistol probably wouldn't get the job done, you can kind of just quickly go through the animation, that 1.8 seconds, and be on your way to taking out more people. But where things get a little bit more challenging is when we take a look at its recoil numbers. And what kind of took me by surprise is that its first shot recoil is one of the highest out of the assault rifles. And that was kind of surprising to me because this is a burst fire weapon. And so you're going to be constantly dealing with that first shot recoil numbers. Like, you can't get around it. Like, you can't hold down the trigger with this gun. Like, you're going to have to deal with the first shot constantly. And so what this kind of forces you to do is to play a little bit more patient. You can't just kind of hold down the trigger or spam the trigger to try to take people out at range, because if you do, you're going to be dealing with an insane amount of first shot recoil, and your weapon is going to be flying all over the place. As for its standard recoil numbers, it's got a vertical of 0.34, and then a left kick of 0.1 and a right kick of 0.4. And so what this means is that when you are spamming the trigger, if you were just kind of clicking as fast as you can, the weapon is going to drift up and then to the right. So now that we kind of have the basic stats out of the way, how do you use this weapon appropriately? Like, how are you going to get the most out of it? Well, personally, I really struggle with burst fire weapons. I don't know what it is. It can be any Battlefield game. It can really be any first-person shooter. Whenever I get my hands on a burst fire gun, I just always seem to struggle. And for the M16A4, that was no different. And so it took me a long time to start to understand how to use this appropriately. And the main thing is that you just need to be very patient with this. If you see a guy around the corner and he's like 20 meters out, my first reaction for that is just to try to spam the trigger button as fast as I can. Try to get as many bullets down range and try to compensate for the recoil. Kind of like what I would do with an automatic weapon. But because this gun has such an insanely high initial recoil, if you do that, the bullets are going to fly everywhere, you're not going to be able to line up any of your shots, and you're probably going to die. Like, if they're 5 feet in front of you, then of course you're going to want to spam it. But anything a little bit further than that, you just need to be a little bit more patient. And I found that once I started to do that, once I started to kind of calm down when I was in these firefights, that's when I started to have the most success, that's when I started to go on some kill streaks. And honestly, when the M16A4 kind of opened up and started to become a pretty awesome weapon. As for its attachments, it kind of took me a while to experiment with different combinations and with different setups, but I think I've come up with a couple combinations that will improve this weapon, or at least kind of make it a little bit better for certain types of playstyle. And so first off, the optic is always going to come down to personal preference. If you like to use red dot sights on every single gun, that's going to be no different for the M16A4. But one caveat of that is that if you are going to use the RDS, even if it's the Coyote, if it's just the standard, a drawback is that it always has its iron sights kind of obscuring the lower half of your view. And when I first started using that weapon, that annoyed the hell out of me. Like every single time I would try to take someone out at range, I just felt like the iron sight feature was obscuring my view, and so that does take some getting used to. If you would like to use a higher optic scope and try to kind of snipe people from range, the one downside of that is while you are much more accurate, it's a lot easier for you to kind of pinpoint and to take those people out at range. Because the M16A4 does have a lot of initial recoil, you're just gonna have to be a little bit more patient with each of your shots, because if you try to spam it, it's gonna fly all over the place, you're not even gonna see what you're shooting at, and you're just not gonna win those firefights. So if you wanna use the higher optics, that's fine, and it's gonna make it a little bit easier for you to take people out at range. You just have to be more patient and a little bit more calm with your trigger finger. As for the barrel attachments, I would say this is a tie between the muzzle brake and the heavy barrel, depending on your type of play style. If you are like me and you like to spam the trigger finger like crazy and you don't want to deal with all that recoil, then I would recommend using the muzzle brake. It's going to reduce it a little bit, and especially if you're playing on maps that has a lot of the medium range engagements, I would say that this is the preferred attachment for that slot. But if you're looking for a weapon that is a little bit more accurate, then I would go down the route of the heavy barrel. It is going to increase your recoil quite significantly. So if you just do not want to be patient, or you just cannot be bothered with that much recoil, then I would avoid this. But if you were looking for a weapon that is going to require a little bit more skill, but at the same time have a lot of killing potential at range, then I would recommend using the heavy barrel. The final slot is pretty much a no-brainer. You're going to want to use the angle grip, as I've been saying throughout today's video. The initial recoil on this gun is insane, and so if there's any attachment or anything in the game that's going to reduce that, you're going to want to use it. And so for the M16A4, I highly recommend you slap on the angle grip. So now, with all of that being said, the M16A4 is a very well-rounded weapon. It does require a different type of mentality when you are trying to get into firefights and how you approach certain engagements, and you're probably going to have to take things a little bit more calm. You're going to have to kind of play things a little bit more defensively, but if you use it correctly, this is a weapon that's going to perform well on pretty much every map. It's got a high rate of fire, so you can do well up close. Its accuracy is pretty manageable at range, so you can take people out at a distance. And so the M16A4, if you are able to master it, and it may take you some time because this is a more skillful weapon than all the other assault rifles out there, or most of the other assault rifles out there, I would say it is well worth the reward, and it's a very satisfying weapon. But that is about it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. But before I go, let me know what you think of the M16A4. Are you satisfied with how it performs? Let me know down below in the comment section. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.